I had a lot of internal conflict for several years, and then I got to a point where I just went into a really dark depression. I was suicidal. It was a very tumultuous time for me.
Who are you?
My mission in life is to help people be more integrated. We all have a million parts of us, and some of us have more parts than others. And when they're not well integrated, we suffer. As a teenager, I hung out with people who were doing drugs and partying and skipping school. And then I was also the captain of the soccer team and was an A student. I told my dad I wanted to major in psychology, and he goes, "Psychology? That's an illness, not a profession." And I was like, well, watch me. I'm going to do it anyway.
What is the neurobiology of trust?
Trauma can get stored in the cells of our body, and that's why for some people talk therapy alone isn't enough. We like to know. We don't like to not know because we feel vulnerable, right? The front is more the emotional calming part. The back is more the physical calming part. And so we would just help your brain signal to itself it is safe to relax. You don't have to morph. You don't have to shift. You don't have to change it. You don't have to fix it. This little da-dum, da-dum, da-dum is our inner guidance saying, this is the lane to stay in for right now. The big question that all of us should be asking ourselves is, are you happy?
Who are you?
Well, who am I today? Who am I tomorrow? I think I'm a student of life. I can define myself as the roles that I play, but more importantly, I think the things that I'm passionate about are who I am. I'm really in love with being a mother. That's probably my favorite thing that I get to do. And one of the ways I get to kind of play with who I am and how I show up in the world for another person. I love learning. I love people. I love weird things and interesting things. You know, that old song that the things that make you go, that's kind of how I live my everyday life. I love neuroscience and geeky brain stuff. I love metaphysical things that make me kind of feel like, how is that even possible? I like wondering about things. I think I'm just a curious person who's trying to be the best version of myself and walking through life, helping as many people as I can also show up as who they are in their full authenticity.
Yeah, you mentioned in the beginning about being a mother, and this is something I'm really interested in because you're somebody who's also done a lot of really important work within neurofeedback and within trauma healing and a lot of these other spaces. And this is a trend I've noticed with a lot of parents is often the first thing that really resonates with them is their parentage. And I'm curious about for you, like, why does that become the number one thing when that question gets asked to you?
Well, I feel really blessed in the fact that I had two super loving parents who screwed up plenty and also did the best job that they could. And I think I learned so much from them, and I learned a lot about what to do and what not to do as a parent. I never thought I wanted to be a mom, to be honest with you. I was 42 when I had my daughter, and I essentially had a change of heart when I held my best friend's, this makes me want to cry, but I held my best friend's premature baby. And I fell in love with him, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to do this. I was supposed to do this. And what I also got to see is that experience with Gabriel prepared me for my own experience because I happened to have a premature baby as well. And so that experience led me to start to see that everything in my life has prepared me for whatever's coming next. And so it's allowed me to look at all the experiences that I had growing up as a child, and to embrace them in a way that maybe I couldn't as a young person. Maybe I thought these things shouldn't have happened to me, or it would have been better if this had happened instead. And now as a mom, I feel like I have an opportunity kind of to reparent myself in some ways as I'm parenting her. I have a way to, an opportunity to show up for her in a way that I feel like maybe my parents weren't able to. She's an awesome teacher to me as well. And she blows my mind every single day. I feel so proud of her, and I feel so proud of the job that we've done as parents. And now co-parents, that now that we're separated, and still trying to navigate that with as much grace and ease as possible. And that to me is like the greatest gift that I can give to the world is creating a little human that sees through eyes of loving kindness and generosity, and who gets to navigate the big hard things in life as well, because they're all around us. And yeah, so it's fun. It's always on my mind. She's 11, and yeah, and it just lights me up and challenges me in every way, shape, or form. Makes me feel the whole entire spectrum of emotions, from I'm so furious right now to I just couldn't have any more love in my heart in this moment.
Wow. I'm curious about that for you. I know much of your work is, again, kind of, you mentioned almost that reparenting and helping people kind of get to that sense of balance, often like working for that. I think grace and ease were like great words that you use, and like it really comes through a lot of your work or your blogs or your talks. And I'm curious about that for you, because it sounds like, now there's a statement where you said you've also like been in often your clients' shoes before, like dealing with either addiction or depression or places where there's not a lot of grace and ease.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through like what was your journey there to getting to this place where grace and ease like is your focus for today?
Well, I would probably go back to early days for me, like early childhood, and I've come to learn as an adult and as a mental health practitioner, and more actually since I started studying neuroscience, about how important those early years are in terms of our development. What I remember most, I grew up on a sheep farm in rural Vermont. That's a little known fact. People don't know that about me. I'm a farm girl. I still sometimes hear my mom saying, "Well, were you raised in a barn?" I'm like, "Well, pretty much, yes, I was." But what I remember most is that I felt everything. And so that's actually who I am also, is I'm a big feeler of things. I'm very empathic, clairsentient, where I sometimes get information because I can sense it and feel it from somebody. That's actually what I think allows me to do the work that I'm able to do with people, is because sometimes they can't even feel what they're feeling because they're so detached from it. I was a big feeler growing up. Fourth grade, my sister made me a little sticker for the refrigerator that said, "Congratulations, you made it through one day without crying." And so then I was like, "Well, it's a bad thing to cry. It's a bad thing to feel." And as you could see, 30 seconds into our interview, I was already there.
Yeah.
I want more people to feel like they can do that, and to not feel like they have to be a certain way, but to just trust themselves so much with whatever they're feeling. So, from an early age, I had my finger on the pulse of the world, basically. And, nobody else in my family was expressing or talking about anything, feeling anything or emoting like externally. And so I took on that job. That became my role in my family. And then, my teenage years were a little bit bumpy, and got involved with some things that were tough. And I was raised very strict Catholic, and decided I wanted to rebel against every aspect of that. And then I found my way back. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I was like, I don't want to be doing any of those things that I've been doing for the last 3 years.
When you say your way back, do you mean like back to Catholicism specifically, or like?
No. I mean, I found my way back to my own mental well-being, because I feel like I really, I remember in 8th grade asking my parents if I could please go to private school. And I actually wanted to go to private Catholic school, and they were like, "Why? None of your older siblings. I'm the youngest of four. None of them went to Catholic school. They all went to this small little high school in our hometown." And after I had gone to like the eighth grade move up day and came home, I felt like I'm not going to do well there. And I didn't have the words to really articulate what I thought would happen, but I felt like I was going to get mixed up with the wrong crowd.
Hmm.
And whether that was foresight, intuition, I'm not sure, probably. And I ended up not going to private Catholic school and going to that public high school, and getting mixed up with some people that, were a little bit shady. So,
Are you open to like talking about what that was or what that was like?
yeah, this is the interesting thing about it, is that most people, well, I don't even know what people would say. Like, I have never gone to any of my high school reunions. I still have very good friends from childhood that I stay in touch with. And I felt like I had kind of lived this dual life as a young adult, as a teenager, where I hung out with people who were doing drugs and partying and skipping school. And then I was also the captain of the soccer team and was an A student. And so I had this like, I had this way of walking both lines and holding it together. But on the inside, I was not holding it together. It was a very tumultuous time for me. And in one way, I felt like with the partying crew, I could be who I was. It's like I didn't have to pretend to be this perfect person anymore. And then on the other hand, I was like, but that's not me either. And so I had a lot of internal conflict for several years. And then I got to a point my junior year where I just went into a really dark depression. I was suicidal, really struggling with dramatic mood swings. I got very sick. I missed a bunch of school. I've missed a bunch of school multiple times throughout my life. I had a very compromised immune system growing up. And now I look at that as my immune system and my emotional regulation system. They're the same thing. They're my nervous system. And it was taxed, from early on. So junior year just went to a super dark place, didn't want to be part of the world anymore. My mom was like, you need to go to therapy. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it. I don't believe in it. Which that's ironic, right? Looking at where I am now. And when I said to you, I found my way back, what I did is I just said, you know what, I need to heal myself. I need to do the inner work. I never went to therapy as a kid. The first time I went to therapy was because I had to when I got to graduate school. They made me. And yeah, so I just got to a point where I was sick of myself and sick of feeling the way that I did. And I knew that it wasn't up to anybody else to get me to a place where I would feel better. It was up to me. And I had to choose. I had to choose whether I wanted to continue to be in despair and live that way and not enjoy my life, or I had to choose to start looking for the small things that filled me up. And so senior year, then I kind of got on my little soapbox, and I wanted everybody to be on this journey of self-healing and making themselves better. And then when I told my dad in particular, I came from a long family of very smart people, engineers. I won awards for math and science in high school, at the same time showing up pretty much high every single day. And I told my dad I wanted to major in psychology. And he goes, psychology? That's an illness, not a profession. And I was like, oh gosh. And then I was like, well, watch me. I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And that kind of became my mindset. Like
Mm.
from that point where I decided I didn't want to live the way that I was living anymore, my mindset became, well, who knows? And watch me and let me just see what I can do. So I went to undergrad, double majored in biology and psychology, and then went right from undergrad to graduate school, and haven't looked back. And now I was just telling the story to a friend the other day, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, like your dad's come a long way," because he and I are really pretty tight these days, um, and he has followed like so much advice that I've had for him
Mm.
in improving his life, and he lives an amazing life as an 86-year-old man, and I'm so proud of him, and he's proud of me. And every time we talk, we get into really deep spiritual conversations that I never had with him growing up. And I feel really lucky in that regard. Did I answer your question? I feel like I went all around the bar.
No, yeah, you totally answered it. I think where I want to zoom back into a little bit is you talk about when you were in high school, you were dealing with these sort of two different halves of yourselves, right? You
Yeah,
had this like high performer who's achieving all this stuff, captain of the soccer team, you're a straight A student, you're knocking it, setting yourself up for all of the great schools. You're winning awards in science and math and all of these different things, yet also like showing up high. And then you have this other like partying side of yourself. And it
right.
sounds like to me, like part of your crux of despair was like essentially like how do you integrate those two parts of yourselves together? Because it sounds
Mhm.
like you were kind of feeling like one part of you was one way but not fully you, and the other one was part of you but not fully you, and you were kind of
Exactly.
in this like
It's a great way of
split.
summarizing.
Yeah, like so I'm curious, and like I think that's even factored into I think one of your favorite topics, which is like the default mode network. Like, how do you make sense of what was going on, and then what were some like the first steps that you did to go from I don't know the life that you know you didn't wanted to finding the life that you did?
Well, integration I think is key, and um, and thank you for kind of summarizing it the way that you just did, because that actually is exactly my mission in life, is to help people be more integrated. And we all have a million parts of us, and still, and you know, some of us have more parts than others, and
Hmm.
when they're not well integrated, I think we suffer.
Hmm.
Um, So, how did I start that integration process? I still am doing that integration process. I still feel like the pendulum can swing either direction. Um, I feel like I'm on you know, this continuum, and um, I'm like a buoy in water, I guess, that's kind of, moving, ebbing and flowing with the ups and downs of the tide. Um, I don't honestly remember what I first started doing, except that I started seeking information, and I wanted to understand myself enough that I started reading, and my intellect was my superpower,
Hmm.
um, and kind of the life force that kept me buoyant through that. It's what didn't allow me to get pulled under, I think. And so even in, you know, senior year into college, it was all about discovering and learning and reading and listening. And I had a great mentor. I can't remember what year I started working at this place. It was called the Center for Human Understanding, and I volunteered there. The Vermont Center for Human Understanding. Dr. Dick and Bettinger, at Barb Jordan, Janice Solik Teft. They were three practitioners that were there. And Barb really took me under her wing. She was a 72-year-old marathoner,
Hmm.
ultra marathoner. She has since passed. Um, but she just helped me love and accept myself in a way. Was kind of my mentor and my therapist. So Dickon was as well. Um, and their orientation really was that your mind is where you get to live, and the outside world is just manifestation of your inner world. And so if you can start working with your inner world and that inner landscape and, designing that in a way that works for you, that you'll have an easier time in life and you'll be able to find joy more easily. And so, I think one of the things I remember most about that time, Cameron, is they said, if you're in a low mood, don't show up. Don't come into the clinic.
Mm.
And I was like, oh shit. Well, how am I ever going to show up? Because I was in a low mood a lot of the time. But what I discovered was I wanted to be there. And so, because I couldn't show up in a low mood, I needed to figure out how to shift my mood in order to be around the people that I loved the most.
Yeah.
And I think it's funny when I say that, what I hear is like, did they not accept my low moods? But the answer is no. They're like, of course you're going to have low moods, but if you're coming in here for your few hours a week, come in with your happy self, bring that part of you in here,
Wow.
because that's what they were selling too. That's what they were helping people find their happy. And be able to also live in the grief and the loss and the suffering, and to be able to hold it all. And they were really my teachers of that. And that's really a big part of what I like to help people with now is like, just be who you are. You don't have to morph. You don't have to shift. You don't have to change it. You don't have to fix it. In fact, the more you try to do that, the bigger it grows.
Mhm.
And so if you can just be witness to all of your experience and love and accept it, no matter what it is, the good, the bad, the ugly, we don't get attached to any of it. You're not going to set up camp in the darkness, and you're also knowing that the sun's only out for part of the day. So enjoy it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that understanding because it's something I relate to a lot with, I think having these different parts of myself where I'm not sure how to integrate them. I'm somebody who's been through like a bunch of different, life journeys or experiences in my life, whether it was like, deeply as a philosophy and theology major. I was born and raised conservative Christian. And then I, went and studied acting. And then I pursued an acting career for a period of time. And then I worked as a director of sales for a neuroscience company. And now
I didn't know all these things about you.
a lot of different little things. And then I went to 54 concerts in a single year and like really explored the rave world and partying for the first time and getting to do a lot of those things. And then at the end of all that, right, there's this period where it's like, well, like, who actually am I? Which is part of why I asked that question, is because it was asked to me in a place where I think the fundamental answer I got to was just like, I don't know. And like
Right.
being okay sitting in the space of like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm curious for you, with all of these different little pieces that you've navigated in different parts of yourself that you've done, it sounds like when you were kind of at that place with the Center for Human Understanding, like, where did you start to, I guess, be okay with all of who you are and not needing to, I guess, figure out or fix or try to understand? Like, what did you actually start doing that allowed that to manifest for yourself?
Well, I feel like I'm still sorting that out, because there are still times where I'm like, oh shit, I need to fix this. Like this is not how I want it to be. And then I have to give myself my own advice and walk my talk, and recognize that you get to be this way too. I've burned myself out a couple of times as an adult and gone into full adrenal fatigue and, flatlined and, been on my back for 3 months. I've ruptured 2 discs in my back, which also made me so I couldn't move for 6 months. My body started to take the toll. And that was really, well, I'm hoping my body doesn't take the toll again. I hope I still listen and stay attuned enough now. But it's a constant journey, and it's not perfected in any way. And I still am working on the integration part. I still have no idea who I am until I wake up and put my feet on the ground, and then I am who I am in that moment. And, as Siegfried Othmer says, you never step in the same river twice. Like, I'm going to show up as this, I'm in the ether. I'm in the world. I'm evolving and shifting, and the integration is the work, right? And it's moment to moment, and it's pausing long enough to attune and say, what am I feeling right now? And do I like this? Am I happy? Am I strong and healthy? Am I feeling like I need to rest? What do I need is I think the main thing that I've got my finger on my own pulse, always saying, what do I need today? What do I need right now? I very much listen to my feelings for everything. I make all major decisions based on my gut. Um, and my logic tries to kick in and take over and give me all of the reasons, but my gut wins every single time. And so that's, for me, the importance of just staying true to that and listening, and trusting, and knowing that I'm going to fuck it up sometimes. And then I have to, do what I need to do to repair. I'm going to screw things up with my daughter. I'm going to, mess things up sometimes with a relationship with a client. I might, I didn't do the best job in my last relationship, so, and still learning from all of it. I'm still integrating, still processing, still digesting. And one of my friends said to me, "When are you going to stop that personal development crap?" And I was like, "Why?" Never. And it's not because I'm dissatisfied with who I am. That's probably the farthest from the truth. It's that I want to continue to be the best, and I want to continue to allow myself the full range of human experience. I want to be an example that other people look to and say, wow, you know what, she's the real deal, and she's in pain, or she's doing well, or, I want to show up, be myself, and know that that's good enough. And I want to help other people do that as well.
Yeah. What part of yourself personally was the hardest to be okay with, or learn to be that was good enough, that you've dealt with personally?
Well, the thing that I think I'm still working on is this inner duality of being that kind of fiercely independent, self-reliant person, and also knowing that I need help, and somebody else has to sometimes be walking arm in arm with me. I don't know exactly if that answered your question, but I think that's where the rub still is for me, is in terms of, a big part of my programs with women who have experienced trauma is looking for the light, finding the light, building resilience, building these, internal resources, but also knowing that there's external resources and knowing how to access them. And I have been fiercely independent most of my life. And, it took a really great therapist to say to me, fierce independence is a trauma response. And I was like, really? But I don't have like big T trauma from early childhood. And it doesn't matter if you have big T trauma. If you somehow learned that connecting to someone else is a danger zone because they can hurt you, they can break your heart, which all of us know that, right? All of us have experienced that. And if you then use that as an excuse to be independent and do it on your own and never rely on anybody else because it might hurt you to do that, you're going to fuck up a lot of relationships. And I didn't want to do that. And so even I feel really lucky in the fact that, my most recent relationship was 22 years. It was a long relationship, and we mutually came to a place where we were like, this isn't best for either one of us anymore. And that was a super hard decision and a really painful decision, I think, for both of us. And for both of us to realize we could never show up in a way that the other person needed us to. And it's not because we are not good enough. It's not because, she isn't the great person that she is. And it's not that I wasn't great for her in some regards, but we weren't exactly what each other needed. And so, that's still the journey that I'm processing and digesting. I think when you first asked me to be on this podcast, I was like, oh, not this month, because like that was right when everything was kind of like
Mhm.
blowing up, and that was a few
Yeah.
months ago. So
Yeah. Yeah. And so it sounds like you kind of came to that place with your partner at the time where it's like, okay, you're mutually separating. And I'm sure there's like part of you can just following that, like that gut feeling and trusting that ultimately. I know that one of the things that you talked about in a previous podcast was like the neurobiology of trust. And I'm curious, can you just walk us through like what is the neurobiology of trust and like how can we tell whether or not we're actually trusting ourselves or when we're deluding ourselves or like how do we navigate self-trust? Because it's such a key part of I think my own journey and so many people's journey of being able to actually trust ourselves, know when we are, when we aren't, or like how do you navigate that personally? And like if you want to talk about the neurobiology of that, I'd love that.
yeah. Well, I think that's the most complicated thing that I feel like I'm still trying to sort through. And, I can listen to Brene Brown and I can listen to Glennon Doyle and, some of the people that talk a lot about these type of things. And, looking at attachment theory and what's happening there. So the neurobiology of trust and kind of the paradox that we live in as human beings is that we're wired for survival and we're wired for protection.
Mm-hmm.
We're wired to be kind of competitive and like be the strongest and get the biggest piece of meat to bring home to feed ourselves and our families. So there's that aspect of us being wired that way, but we're also mammals, and so we're also wired in a way that we co-regulate, meaning that we need another being to show us the way.
Mm-hmm.
And that can feel like it's conflicting, right? Because it's like we need this other person to help us. Think about a small child. They wipe out, they fall down, and what's the first thing they do? They look to that adult caregiver to know how they should be responding. Like, do I cry because that hurt, or do I feel badly because I didn't do it right, or so we're looking to that person. And we still do that as adults. Like we co-regulate. We're in a room with people and we will be feeling all of it
Mm-hmm.
and learning how to relate and how to know where we end and where they begin. And so there's the trust in others, right? That comes from those early relationships. And then that's what teaches us how to trust ourselves. And so if we don't trust another person because they weren't reliable or they were inconsistent, like maybe they were super loving and kind sometimes, and then they were, unavailable or neglectful or abusive at another time. And so if you study attachment styles, which I have done, and there's lots out there in the world about that, we start to understand ourselves a little bit more based on how we were nurtured and how we were cared for. And if we also had a caregiver that didn't trust themselves, then we're not going to have a model for what does self-trust look like? What does self-confidence look like? What does self-reliance look like? And so we learn so much by whatever that primary caregiver was offering to us. Now, with that said, and this is what I did my graduate work on, there are many people who did not have someone, or their someone really failed them in big ways, and yet they still worked it out on their
Sure.
own. And so that's the beauty of resilience, is that it's built in, it's hardwired. There's something called innate health. It's the part of us that wants to get back to equilibrium and balance and homeostasis. And it's the part of us that can pull ourselves up when we've been knocked down. And it's naturally occurring, but we also can cultivate that. We also can grow that and build that. So self-trust begins with knowing that you can listen to yourself and that there's information that's being signaled from your body to your brain and back down again. There's information that your brain is taking in from the world around you. That's called interoception and exteroception. Um, and and all of that is helping us make sense out of who we are and how we fit into the world.
Hmm.
And, all these different brilliant networks of the brain have lots of jobs and they're all working concurrently. And sometimes some of them are switched on and while others are quiet. And there can be dysregulation at any level. Um, and and then there's always this self-righting capacity for everybody. So even somebody with, severe and chronic mental illness, there's still something inside of them that's trying to right itself, something that's trying to get back to a place of balance. And that's really what I try to appeal to in every single person that walks through my door here at my clinic or who I get an opportunity to work with, even in the community. It's that self-belief and that understanding that everyone's like a cork in water, that no matter how much is, pushing it down and pushing it under, as soon as that stuff is let go of, that cork is going to come back up and be buoyant.
Yeah. And how do we know whether or not we are, because you talk about like listening to yourself, for example, like there's, I think depending on what kind of version of therapy you look at, or like whether there's parts work, for example, right, where we can often have like different voices in our head who are talking to us, or like, how do we know which to actually listen to?
That's the magic question, right? You don't really. And, I remember asking this question of my mentor probably 30 years ago and just saying, how do I know what to trust? And how do I know if this feeling is something I can count on? And the answer I remember hearing was that you just practice and then you test the waters. And so it's sort of like, again, back to the child who's learning how to walk, like they don't know how to do it, but they put one foot in front of the other and then they see if that gets them where they want to go. And so, building self-trust and learning how to listen. And so for so many of us, the louder voice is the voice of the intellect and the ego and the learning, and not the voice of wisdom or divinity. And we will feel like we're in that, but somebody else told me to do this, or somebody else thinks I should do this, or I think somebody thinks I should do this, instead of what do I think? What do I believe? What do I feel is right for me? And I have to take pause all the time and ask myself that, because as a empathic person, you get used to making sure everybody else is happy around you, because then you'll feel good. If everybody else feels good, then you'll feel good too. And you have to get to a place where you're like, sorry, they're not doing so well, but I can still, feel good in spite of this person that I love and care for really suffering and struggling. I don't have to down-regulate and co-regulate in that regard, where I'm being pulled out of a regulated state to meet them. I can still hold my own grounding. And so, how do you know if that voice that's coming through you is wisdom and your true voice? You don't. You just check it out, and then you get to a point where you're like, okay, that feels right, and you don't have to question it so much anymore, because you build this resonance where it's like, okay, now I know. You have momentum in that direction. But when you're first figuring it out, you're clumsy like a little kid. That's, you're going to stumble, you're going to fall down. You're like, oops, that wasn't my truth. That was, I did that for someone else to make them happy. So, one of I worked with a shaman in 2000 and, gosh, when did I meet her? 2002 or 3, I guess. And I worked with her for almost a decade weekly. And I remember her, she was a student of Don Miguel Ruiz's and a Toltec. And one of the things that she shared with me was some of the teaching that he had offered to her, which is, are you happy? And just constantly asking that question, are you happy? Are you happy? And making decisions that support that for yourself instead of, I remember for 6 months, asking that question constantly. I remembered snowshoeing up Mount Hood with my brother in the freezing cold, and I'm sweating because I was really not in good shape to be snowshoeing.
Mm.
and and I remember going, "Are you happy, honey?" And I'm like, "Hell no, this sucks. I want to be at home in front of the fireplace." But I had to just figure out, like, who am I? What do I want? What makes my heart sing? And can I still go for that, even if it's going to make somebody else unhappy?
Mm.
And and I think ultimately that's where my partner of 22 years and I came to a point where we were both like, you know what? We both want something a little bit different that doesn't make the other person happy,
Mm.
and it's okay. And how can we still honor and still continue to be great friends and good, fantastic parents, I think. And still, we talk on the phone for probably over an hour every single week just about life. And we're still really great friends. And I feel very lucky. Um, but trusting enough to know that you don't have to be pleasing other people all the time, that there's going to be times where you're making a choice for yourself because it's the right thing for you, and it might make somebody else unhappy.
Mm.
And I'm always considerate of the choices that I make. At least I try to be always considerate of how my choices are going to impact another person or impact the environment or impact, my pets or,
Mhm.
whatever. I'm very conscientious about the choices I make, and are they supporting longevity for myself, my loved ones, my community, my family, the world, Mother Earth. Like I want to be making decisions that support vitality and are life giving instead of life taking.
Mm. Yeah. For that part, when you're talking about the life giving versus life giving, I think this goes back to when you're kind of talking about like when you're first building that self trust muscle, you're like kind of going out into the world, and then you're basically testing. Like you talked about, like walking as a little kid, and you kind of figure it out more or less like as you go along. You start to identify like what's working and what's not.
Yes.
Um, Within that regard, is that essentially like tied to like how you're feeling? Like is that like the baseline of am I going in the right direction or I'm not when you're starting to flex that muscle?
Well, that's a great question because you would think if I was in self-trust all the time, I would feel good all the time,
Mm.
right? But the answer is no. There's going to be you're still you're gonna, we're all going to have these ebbs and flows called, moods
Mm.
and emotions. We're all going to have reactions and responses to things based on our life experiences, based on our belief system, based on our current state of mind. Like there's sometimes somebody could say something to me and it would hurt my feelings. And other times they would say it to me and I'd be like, whoa, all
Mm.
right. And, I'm able to kind of say that's theirs, not mine. Um, but so it's a yes and no to that question, because there's
Mm.
times where it's like, of course, it's all about how am I feeling and what am I able to do and how am I able to respond. And that doesn't always mean I'm going to feel great. You
Mm.
can still do hard things even when you don't feel good.
Mm.
And um, I mean, I can think about the I can look back at all of the hard things in my life, and I can identify probably the day, the month, the year that those hard things happened.
Mhm.
Um, and I also know that on those same days, I still had to show up and do other things. I still had to be present for other people in my world. Um, and then there were some days where I got to say, you know what, I can't do this today, and that's okay, and everybody's going to be okay in spite of the fact that I'm not there for them. Like I
Mhm.
can't save the world, and I shouldn't put myself in that position. I don't want to be in that position.
Mm.
Um, so you know, being in touch with the sensations, understanding where they're coming from, understanding the story that's behind them, is was my reaction to that situation because of something that actually happened when I was 14 years old, or you
Mhm.
know, why do I have such a strong? Sometimes I just get a really strong feeling about something, and I'm like, whoa, all
Mm.
right, Darla Ann, what's up? I'm constantly having this conversation with myself about what am I experiencing and what is that about? Is that about really what's going on here, or is it about what's going on here and here? And do I need to do something to do my own inner work to process and digest this? Do I need to say and do something to be in the world to shift this in a way that works better for me or for other people? And so, I'm constantly I think about it through a brain perspective, like the back part of my brain's taking it all in, and then the front part of my brain's trying to sort it out and make sense out of what do I do with it. And yeah, and my feelings and my sense about things is my guide.
Hmm. Yeah. So when you're taking all of that stuff in, I think especially as a highly empathetic person, and like I think in our current world, we're more globally attached to all of the various problems that are going on in the world, not just within our family life, but within our neighborhood. I know you mentioned you're living in Portland right now, where there's a lot going on
Yep.
locally, and then you have all of the world events, and all of that is so much more visceral than it ever has been, I think, before, because we have our cell phone in our pocket. I know my grandma always
Yep.
talked about a big thing that changed for like World War II, for example, or these other wars, Vietnam, was that like they were in your TV, right? They were in your
Right.
home versus just being on the newspaper or on the radio or whatever it was. And
Right.
now we carried that around with us. For you as like a highly empathetic person, like how do you like I guess when does like that empathy start to become a burden? And then how do you actually like learn to like regulate with that so that you're not
Yeah.
just, I guess, burning out from
That's
self-care
right.
almost in a sense? Yeah.
Well, all of us are inundated with the news and what's going on around us. My friend Justin, I laugh every time I replay a conversation he and I had where he's like, "What are you, living under a rock?" And I'm like,
Mm,
"Yes, I like my rock. Thank you very much." Because I am very careful about what I bring into my world, what I consume. And that's not just, what I put in my mouth, but it's what comes in my ears, what comes through my eyes, what I'm taking in experientially and sensorily. Um, I'm 2 blocks from the ICE headquarters here at my office, and I'm very conscientious about, what news I take in. I prefer to read my news rather than watch, because I
mm,
feel like then I can have my own thoughts and my own perspective about it instead of being
mm,
influenced by the other person who's reporting it, or
mm,
what I'm seeing. Our visual cortex takes up a huge part of our brain. And so we are mostly visual learners. And those imprints, I think, can last a lot longer. And so,
mm,
um, you know, to some extent, I have certain I call them nervous system reset remedies or neuro hacks, like certain things that I do that keep myself balanced
mm,
and well. I do a lot of visualization. My favorite one actually is thinking about like a big a big eagle's wings just kind of coming and wrapping
mm,
around me and wrapping around my heart, or an angel's wings, and just knowing that there's times where I need to protect, um, and other times where I need to open up. And
mm,
that to me is also the balance and the integration, is like, right now I
mm,
need to be open. Right now I need to take it in. Right now I need to look and listen. I need to pay attention. And then right now I need to just go inward, and I need to pay attention and tend to all the little cells of my body that are looking to me for leadership.
yeah. Yeah. Well, that kind of like, I guess, pivots into a question I was curious about for you, because I think on your website, you talk about really a key part of your work is like integration of the body, the mind, and then the spirit. And I was
Yeah.
curious about for you, like, A, how do you distinguish between those three things? And then
Good. Great
how do you work
questions.
on them both like individually and then collectively?
Well, they're to even name them mind, body, spirit, soul, whatever, is not accurate, right? Because
Okay.
it's all the same thing. Um, I remember in graduate school, like a long time ago, talking about the mind body connection. And then I was like, there's mind body connection. It's like, it's all the same thing. So every little cell has its own mind. And yes, there's a brain. Maybe that's what people were talking about, the brain-body connection. Okay, so the brain, the spine, the vagus nerve, like we can understand all of that, but it's all the same thing. And so anything we do to our body is going to affect our state of mind. Anything we do to our state of mind is going to show up in our body. Um, and and then our bodies are just energy, which is the spirit and the soul part of it, right? And so, um, when I'm talking about integrating mind, body, and spirit and soul, more of what I mean is like how do you nourish yourself as a sentient being, as somebody who's energetic and spiritual in nature, but also in physical form.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to do both. We have to do all of it. We have to nurture it all. And sometimes, the tools need to be different for whatever aspect it is. And I think about that as being one of the joys that I have in the work that I do, is that I like to have like this whole entire melting pot of tools that I can rely on. My daughter last week, we were looking for Halloween candy and she goes, "Mom, they should have a do-it-yourself, make your own like Halloween bag," because none of the bags had exactly the mix of candy that she wanted. And I was like, yes, I agree with you 100%. And that's what my practice is about, is like having a do-it-yourself like candy bag of like treats and sweets and tools, because not everybody's going to heal the same way. Not everybody needs the same thing. I do believe that everybody needs something that works with both the body and the mind and the spirit. Everybody needs, we know that trauma can get stored in the cells of our body. And that's why for some people, talk therapy alone isn't enough. And I also know people who are doing really good somatic experiencing work and there's still something missing. And so I feel like we need to be able to pull for every person that is on this healing journey and find exactly what's right for them. And that's why in my work is called The Self-Healed Mind. My mission is about people deciding and choosing what they need to self-heal and having the internal resources to do that, and also knowing how to access the tools and external resources in order to be able to do that. And nobody's going to take the same path. No one person will take the same path.
Yeah. So if you were like walking somebody through that, and if you want to use me, more than welcome to, but like if I'm like, hey, I have all these different pieces, like I don't really know, there's things I kind of want in my candy bag, there's things I don't want in there, but like, what do I actually do with that? How do I actually go about finding my unique candy bag that allows me to kind of live and thrive in this life?
Well, I mean, let's do it. Let's like dive in. So, I mean, mostly what I wear this, neuroscience hat. I'm always looking through the lens of the brain and the nervous system. I'm an instructor for EEG Info. You got to interview my mentor, Dr. Siegfried Othmer. I like the brain stuff of it. And then I also like the woo-woo spirit stuff of it. And I feel like everybody needs a little bit of everything. And so from the neuroscience end of things, we're looking at certain patterns that the nervous system will manifest that show good function or show some functional deficits. And so I would be on the hunt for, okay, what's working well, what's not working well. So those patterns have to do with arousal regulation deficits, which is like how what's the overall tone of our nervous system? Are we in this state of high arousal where we're in fear and locked into fight, flight, or freeze? Are we, in a shutdown mode because we've gotten so inundated by the world that we've just switched off? And so we look at arousal regulation deficits and we think about, like, is this person someone who's experienced a lot of adversity and trauma in their life? And so even if they're super resilient and have managed it well, do the cells of their body and their bones remember that something hard happened? And that something hard will automatically put them on defense and in that protective mode. And then there's other patterns that could make somebody so that they're feeling like they're on this roller coaster where everything's firing all at once, and they go through periods of time where everything's cool as a cucumber, and then they fly into a panic attack or migraine headache or a seizure or an autoimmune flare-up, or anything that's just chaos in that moment. And so I'm listening for those kinds of things. And then I'm listening for, does this brain have the ability to shift gears and put on brakes and steering and redirect itself? Does this person have certain learned fears and habits, certain disinhibitions, was there a brain injury, or is there certain circuits that aren't doing their job as well? And so I would dive into a nervous system conversation if you were coming in my door. But I would start the conversation with, what's working well for you and what do you feel like you struggle with?
Yeah.
And, most people that come to me aren't, most people have some struggle. And, but I will work with peak performers and professional athletes and, very, very high achievers, but they still, take 4 hours to fall asleep because their mind is like busy working on something, or they still, get their feathers ruffled when somebody criticizes them. Or so I like to really understand, what's the armor and what's the ache.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess if you want to like dive in, like I think something that I came in to a kind of a realization yesterday. I was having a conversation with ChatGPT actually, and I had a dream the night before, and in that dream, I like basically got into a cloud with these two people that I met in my dream. And while I was in that cloud, it sounded like somebody, fell or hurt or something like that outside. And I had the feeling like our cloud was falling, and I had the sense that like we were falling towards the ground. And so I kept waiting for this like impact, and the like longer it took, the more that I was like certain that, oh shoot, we're not going to hit, we're gonna die. Like it was all of this kind of stuff. And then I woke up. When I talked about it with ChatGPT the next day, it was essentially like what came through me was like how I was like bracing for an impact that never came, and how like so much of my own nervous system is often like I'm waiting for the shoe to drop in so many different moments. So I guess for something like that, like what would be your, I don't know, your guidance or direction, or feel free to ask me a question if you want to go down that route.
Well, first of all, I love ChatGPT. I think like there's so much great information there, and then I also know that it's AI, and so there's gonna be mistakes that are there and misrepresentations that are there. But I think it's a great tool to use for self-reflection, and which is exactly how you were using it, and I do the same. If we're combining all of it here, I love dream work, and I also love looking at how everything that was in that dream is a part of you, including the cloud. And so, what does the cloud represent? It maybe represents a container. It maybe represents something squishy and light and fluffy. And then on the flip side, there's also the fear that was in your experience in that dream, is that even in this light cloud fluffy area, there was still danger. And the anticipation of the impact. And then also, was there a part of you that felt like you needed to not only brace for it, but did you need to prevent it? Because there were these other beings that were in there with you. Who were those other beings? Because they're a part of you as well.
Yeah.
And so that's the therapy work that I would do with you from a nervous system perspective, looking at, okay, this is a person who is bracing for impact. This is a person who's waiting for the other shoe to drop. Is this a pattern that you've seen throughout your life, where you've always kind of been in this anticipation that something bad is going to happen or something painful is going to happen?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think for me personally, I know a lot of people can relate to this, but it's, this feeling of, okay, things are going to go really well, and I'm waiting for that moment where there was a major rupture. Like, there's a peak point in my life when my dad was arrested and had a bunch of things that happening. And then there was other things in my life that have happened where, I'm feeling like betrayed at a job or various pieces. And there's part of my nervous system, I think, that is kind of always waiting for that big thing to happen in
Yep.
so many different areas of my life and then that can kind of keep me in a place where I'm I think part of it was like kind of noticing even within that dream that I was more observing rather than participating, right? Because there's that feeling of if I participate, then like something bad might happen, or that there's that fear almost of it happening, and that's keeping me from being actually like present and in the moment. Because again, kind of if I'm there, it was like the semi-realization I feel like that I have with it is that like essentially I was like actually like flying, but like my fear was that I was falling.
Okay. And then was there also a part of you that felt like you didn't want to be responsible for whatever the outcome was?
Well, I didn't really feel responsible for it, the outcome. I felt like I was
You were at the mercy of whatever was going to
yeah, it
happen.
was like I was in this really cool moment, and like while the three of us are together, this like there's a cool opportunity for us to connect or like have this cool thing experience that might happen or just whatever. It might be we're floating in a cloud, like whatever, and then it's like all going to shit. Like as soon as
Yeah.
that like happiness sort of happens, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So from a brain perspective, what I would again go back to is this is arousal regulation, right? Like there's this part of your nervous system that anticipates something not happening the way that you want it to, that unexpected. We like to know. We don't like to not know
Mm-hmm.
because we feel vulnerable, right? The not knowing part is scary. And so there might be programs and patterns in your subconscious mind, in your body, in your conscious memory, even that something good can be, ripped away in a heartbeat. And that hurts. That's painful. And so every part of your nervous system will try to be protecting and defending against that kind of pain from happening again. So what we would do from a neurofeedback perspective, and so, for anybody who's listening who doesn't know about neurofeedback, this is a way of giving the brain information about itself. It's essentially helping the brain watch the ebb and flow of its own activity. I put these tiny little sensors, I have some here, right here. These
It's
tiny little sensors, I think of them as like little headphones, and they just, I don't know if you can see that.
yeah.
They're like little headphones, and we put them on different parts of the scalp that correspond to the functional area of the brain. And so I would start by calming down the back part of your brain, the part of the brain that takes information in from your body and from the world, because that sensory input, if it's not being processed and integrated in a regulated way, you will feel overwhelmed by sensory input. So you'll feel like there's too much here, it's too loud, things are moving too fast. I feel unsafe. And so we would start by calming down the posterior cortex of the brain to help you feel more safe in the world. And then the right hemisphere of the brain is all about early development. And, that has a big part to do with safety as well, and being seen and known and soothed. And so we would put electrodes on the right back part of your head, maybe the right front part of your head. The front is more the emotional calming part. The back is more the physical calming part. And so we would just help your brain signal to itself that it is safe. It is safe to relax. It is safe to feel. It is safe to allow. And then I would also want to know, like, is your nervous system prone to rapid state changes? Are you somebody who can fly into a panic attack or a mood swing, or do you have autoimmune issues or something else that we would put in another category that would tell me, gosh, I better keep the balance between that right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. Otherwise, I'm going to stir up a panic attack for this guy or a migraine headache. So any of that we need to know about?
No, I mean, I think I'm functionally pretty healthy. I would say like similar to you, like if anything, I'm very prone to like self-flagellation with like being a high performer or wanting to achieve a lot. And a lot of I think what I've been working on personally has been just like being okay not doing that and like allowing like figuring talked about like struggle. I think the thing that I've been really working on the most is like how do I achieve from a place of ease rather than a place of striving and like working hard all the time. It's like I know that I'm capable of doing really hard things, and I've done lots of really hard things, and that's great. And I would, I think even within this podcast, I got to a point with where I was working on something, and it was kind of a last minute thing, and I was up really late, and I was frustrated, and the technology was breaking, and I just kind of like lost it on myself, and I went through a whole self beat up cycle, and I kind of came through that cycle and at the end of it, where I was like, I'm not willing to sort of go to that point anymore. Like, I refuse to kind of allow myself to push myself to a point where the only other option to get myself to do the work is to beat myself up a lot.
Yeah.
It wasn't effective. It wasn't working. And ultimately it's like, at the
There's
end of the day,
consequences. There's consequences to doing that
yeah,
outweigh the benefit.
yeah, exactly. And the internal, ultimately, like I think you talked about this earlier, but ultimately all we have is like our internal experience. And so if I'm completely sacrificing that for, something that I supposedly want to achieve, then what am I doing? And then that's not the life that I want to be cultivating or setting an example for whatever future kids I have or all of that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Exactly. I can remember a time when I was doing something very similar,
Mm,
and just the struggle was real trying to complete something. And my daughter, who was probably 8 or 9 at the time, goes, "Mom, why don't you just set it down for a little while and come back to it?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I love that. You know that. Um,
you
Thank
mean take
you."
a break?
And I even said to her, I said, "Thank you." And I go, "But I can't." And then in that moment, I was like, "But I need to, because I have eyes watching me right now,
Mm,
watching me and knowing if I'm going to walk my talk right now." And
mm,
and that helped me. That maybe that's one of the things I love about being a mom too, is like she keeps me in check. Um, but what you're saying here is really just attuning to yourself to a point where you're like, I am unwilling to pierce my own heart anymore. I am unwilling to tax my nervous system in this way. Dr. Brene Brown talks about this. Like, she talks about, I can put myself through something like this. I could handle it. Like, your
yeah,
nervous system could handle it,
yeah,
Cameron. But why would you? And why would you choose that for yourself? If you truly love and honor yourself, you will not cause harm to yourself. And causing harm is something that we can do by overdoing it, by
mm,
pushing too much. And we send, adrenaline, cortisol, like all those things that
mm,
get distributed, all of those little neuromodulators that get sent out when we're upset, impact our cellular health. And so, and cause inflammation. Like, why would
mm,
we want to do that? If you want to live long and happy, like, you're in charge. Yeah.
mm.
So make a different choice. And it doesn't mean that there won't be times where you still, hitting yourself. You remember the old thing where the person goes to the doctor and they're like, "My head hurts." And
Sure.
the doctor's like, "Well, what is that in your hand?" "Well, it's a hammer." "Well, what are you doing with a hammer?" "Oh, I'm hitting myself." "Well, maybe stop doing that."
Right, right, right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we're all going to do those things again where we're like, "Oh gosh, I just did that again and it's not good for me."
Mm,
And so let me self correct. If we think about, Tony Robbins talks about this example with pilots, and, pilots are constantly recalibrating depending on the world that they're flying in.
sure.
And so if there's a strong wind, they have to correct in a certain way. If there's, air pockets, they have to correct in a certain way. And as humans, we're constantly recalibrating. And that's where I want people to have the tools and resources to be able to do that, to know how to self-correct,
Mm,
to know how to be the little bumps on the side of the road that are saying, "Wait, you're getting off track here. And that's dangerous. You're gonna crash and burn if you go here." This little da-dum, da-dum, da-dum
mm,
is our inner guidance saying, "This is the lane to stay in for right now, because that's going to get you where you need to go."
yeah, beautiful. I had a couple other questions. So I had a little
Sure.
fun experiment with ChatGPT to kind of just see what 3 questions, and to not tell me why it wanted me to ask you these questions, but I wanted to ask you them. So one of them is, you've helped rewire people's stress responses a lot. Have you ever met someone whose chaos was actually their own creative rhythm?
Why? Yes. Um, I would use myself as an example there. I
Mm,
think that to some extent, the chaos that I've been through and that I can self-create
mm,
is part of the journey. Remember how I said earlier in this conversation that I had this epiphany with my friend's son that and then my daughter's premature birth, like every experience I've had has set me up for what's coming next.
mhm,
And I do think that sometimes the chaos is exactly the journey that the person needs to embark upon in order to step into that next version of themselves. And
mm,
so I think for everybody that's true. Everybody's chaos is part of their creativity. And the idea here is, with self-healing is not to abandon any part of yourself, even the parts that are chaotic. It's about harnessing that chaos in a
mm,
way that is not destructive, but in a way that is creative, in a way that, you take somebody who's bipolar, and sometimes those manic episodes are when they have brilliant, musical creations, or they
mm,
write a book, or they, you know, do a public speaking gig for a week or two when they're on that and they impact a ton of people. Um, so again, it's like, why do we have this judgment of like the chaos being the bad? And
mm,
it's all, and it's all of it, that we want to embrace it all, and we want to harness it all, and we want to sometimes make the effort to extinguish some of it or quiet it down, or at least cool the jets a little bit. But
mhm.
that's kind of the joy of life, right?
Yeah. Do you have like a tool or a method or anything that you typically recommend? I know you've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs and high performers, like you've talked about, like who probably have a lot of that like chaotic part that they need to learn to harness. Like when somebody's wanting to harness that, like how do you actually harness that chaos and not let it become something that just is, I don't know, detrimental to your life, but is actually something that you're using as a creative life force moving forward?
Well, I think every person has to know where the boundary is, to the point where it's like, this is now hurting me.
Mm,
So that would be the constant conversation that I would be having with a client, or asking them to have with themselves, is, how is this serving you right now? In what way is it serving you? And are there any ways that this is not nurturing you and not serving you, or is it harming someone else? And just to have that level of mindfulness, and then, as far as how do we harness it? Um, you know, how do we act as the little blue healer that's nipping at the edge of
mhm,
the herd and trying to, you know, get it more orderly? I think everybody needs to figure out how to do that for themselves, having a great mentor and a guide to be able to do that, taking the pendulum often will be swinging for all of us, and we don't want it swinging so hard that it's coming around and knocking us on the other side. We want to be able to still have that flow that still has the grounded center. As far as a tool, I think neurofeedback's a great tool for kind of
mhm,
finding that balance and that rhythm, and being able to know when to go and know when to slow.
mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. And the other question I have is what's the line between healing and hiding when the pursuit of calm actually becomes another form of control?
That's a question. Um, I think we're always at a risk of that being the case. Like, and that's something that everybody should be aware of. And thank you for even asking that question, because, um, our nervous system, again, wants to protect and defend and hide to keep ourselves safe and alive. And also, in that kind of tethering, or in that self-soothing, that calming, um, again, it's a matter of looking at, what's the habit here? Why did this happen? Why are you standing in the corner with your back, your back turned so that nobody can really see you, what part of you still feels like it needs to be kept safe and protected? And is there a part of you that wants to feel brave in this very moment as well? Because we need to have courage to be able to turn around, because sometimes we turn around and we're like, there's nothing here anymore. There's nothing here for us to be hiding from or ashamed of or to be afraid of, except that voice in our head or that idea that we had or that history that we have that's still running the water down that path of at least resistance, which is the one that we're most familiar with, which might be living in fear. And so we've got to be willing to, put a little temporary blockade there so that that water has a chance to go down a different pipeline. And sometimes that takes a whole heck of a lot of courage to be able to just turn around and say, okay, is there a part of me that's willing to be seen? Is there a part of me that can rest? Because even I had a mentor one time say to me, coasting is still forward movement, because I never really let myself coast. And that was big learning for me. At that time, I hired her right after I had totally burned my adrenals out and wasn't able to work for a couple of months. And she said, we need to be able to pace ourselves and know that there's times when we're going to gun it. We're going to step on the gas. We're going to spin out. We're going to, derail ourselves. And then there's times where we need to, pump the brakes. There's times where we need to step on the gas and then let off and just coast. And, looking at coasting as being forward movement and knowing that we want to stay attuned and listen and learn and be courageous and willing to try some things out and to be able to back off and move forward and redirect. And also to know that there's going to be times that you're doing that to keep yourself in your pattern, unbeknownst to yourself, because it's safest there. And then there will be these little flashes of insight and wisdom and inspiration that come through you that say, turn around and let me show you what I've got. And then you'll be like, oh, that was impulsive. I probably shouldn't have just done that. And then you'll reel it back in again. That's life. That's life, is like just trying it all, saying yes as much as you can. And also being willing to say, nope, that's now a real no for me. Yeah. So check it out. Be willing, be courageous, be brave, be adventurous, and also know your limits,
Yeah, beautiful. I think it's a great spot to kind of wrap it up there. One final question that I ask all of my guests on the show is, what's one question that you would have for the audience that might have them consider something in a different way or think about something from a different perspective?
Well, I think the big question that all of us should be asking ourselves is, the one that Tatiana said to me that she learned from Don Miguel is, are you happy? Is this all there is? And that was a question I asked myself a couple of years ago. And I was like, I've asked myself that multiple times throughout my life. Is this all there is? If this is what my life was like every day moving forward, is that enough? Mm-hmm. And there are times where I hear a voice that says, a heck no, And then I get an idea of, well, what would be next for you? And then I allow myself to start wondering and creating. And if there are areas where you look at where you're like, you know what, I'm pretty happy here, and I think this could be better, then have the courage to make it better. Have the courage to ask the questions of the other people that might be involved or the environment that you're in, like just to ask yourself that question of, is this enough? Because you are enough, and you get to create however you want to create. And so if there's a part of you that has a longing, it is your inner guidance that is saying there's something more for you, and follow the lead of that.
Beautiful. Darla, this was a wonderful conversation. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you for the opportunity, Cameron. It was fun getting to know you as well.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anywhere you want to send people to, any like websites or social media or anything?
The Self-Healed Mind is my website, and that's where you can learn a lot about what I do, what I have to offer. On Instagram, I'm Awakening Whole Brain Wisdom.
Hmm.
And that's really what I'm doing, is just helping people learn how to heal by awakening all of the wisdom that is within their mind, body, and spirit's capacity.
Beautiful. Well, thanks again for coming on the show, and we'll have to talk again soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Ciao.